If you are an NFL fan, you've got a 1 in 32 chance to see your team win the Super Bowl in any given year. And if you're a Colts fan like me, your best odds of seeing that happen are probably going to be in Madden. But even in the video game world, it's not as easy as it might sound to rebuild a team from the gutter to greatness. So today, I am going to walk you guys through each step that I take when rebuilding teams in Madden's franchise mode. So starting things off with the absolute basics, once you've selected franchise mode, you'll go in here, you'll select create new league, and from here you'll see you've got several options to go with. My personal preference is to always go with online, real life roster if I'm doing a rebuild. The only reason I would really use active roster is if you've made any customizations in the main menu or if you want to do a fantasy draft. Now let me know in the comments if you're interested in a fantasy draft rebuild or a fantasy draft guide. I'm more than happy to do either of those if there's a demand for it. Please do let me know if that's something that would be interesting to you, and I will gladly do so. But starting with real life NFL rosters here, online, here you can select which week you'd like to start with. So for me personally, if I'm doing a rebuild, I'll just go with the latest available, which right now is the wild card round. So you're starting with all real life rosters, stats, everything is going to be up to date. So we'll go ahead and select that. And then now it's time to select a team. So if this is your first rebuild, I would say go ahead and select your team. That's what's going to make it the most fun. Me personally, I'm a Colts fan. Every single year when Madden comes out, that's the first team I rebuild. But use your imagination. Every single team in the NFL you can come up with an interesting scenario for. So just stopping at a random team here. If we go with the Packers, do we try and move on from Aaron Rodgers this offseason? What do we do with him? We can go to the Rams. Do we try and maybe start tearing things down? Do we try and trade Jalen Ramsey, Aaron Donald? The Ravens, what do you do with Lamar? The Saints, go get yourself a quarterback. Maybe start rebuilding. You've got a pretty old team. The Seahawks, you're looking good. You've got a lot of young players. How do you start building those guys up? So really every single team, if you're creative, have fun with it. That's my best piece of advice here when picking a team. Now once you've selected a team, you can change a few settings here. You can change your role, so you can go player or owner. If you're doing a rebuild, I would recommend just sticking with the coach. If you're an owner, really the main difference is that you can relocate your team, so if you're into that, by all means, but if not, I probably would just stick with coach. You can use a custom coach if you'd like to. We're not going to for this rebuild or tutorial, I should say. And here you can change your settings. So if you're just simming, I really wouldn't recommend changing much of anything. If anything, maybe turning the injuries on or off. That's up to you though. It's personal preference. Everything else though, I usually leave the same. Now if you're actually playing the games, it might be worth changing some of the settings as far as the difficulty level, the quarter lengths, the play clock, and so on, but I would say go ahead and leave just about all of that the same. And with that being said, we are ready to go ahead and hop into this, so let's look at a few more settings that we will change that are going to be very important for the rebuild. So this is what I would consider tip number 2. Tip number 2 is a massive one. It's going to be your playbooks. And if you don't change your playbooks, that is potentially a reason why you might not be winning as many games as you'd like to, depending on the level of talent that you have on your team. So to change your playbooks, you're going to click on Manage Staff, go into Team Schemes, and once you're in Team Schemes, you can see here it will give you the option to select your offensive scheme, defensive scheme, and your offensive and defensive playbooks. Now the schemes, those are going to help you out in training. It's going to help your guys get some more XP, so what I would always recommend doing is just go with what fits your team the best. The only caveat with that would be if you want to run a 4-3, don't do a 3-4 scheme, if that makes sense. So we know the Colts defense is a 4-3, and the playbook that we're going to change to is a 4-3. So there, we've got a good fit. Now the playbooks. Let me know in the comments what your favorite playbooks to run are. There are 2 on each side of the ball that I have found success with. Offensively, the Bengals offense is going to give you great passing stats. Your quarterback's going to be very efficient. It's usually going to be something like 5,000 yards, 30-something touchdowns, and right around 10 interceptions, so very good numbers. Usually even less than 10. Now the Bucs offense is going to be similar passing numbers, right around the same amount of yards, a little less touchdowns and a few more interceptions, so not quite as efficient. You're still going to be slinging it, and your running back is going to have more success in that kind of system. We did a Colts rebuild where we ran the Bucs offense, and that's what we're going to run in this one. And we consistently saw CJ Stroud around 5,000 yards, 35 touchdowns, 10 picks. Jonathan Taylor was always racking up around 1,600 yards. So that was a good playbook for us. So Tampa Bay offense is a really good one to run. That is my personal favorite. I have had success with the Bengals as well. And if I can find Tampa Bay here, I wish they were in some kind of order. There it is. Okay. Tampa Bay offense is what we're going to run here. Now, defense. There are two defenses. One, I've noticed a lot more success with than the other. These are both 4-3 defenses. So please let me know if you have any 3-4s that work well for you. But as far as 4-3s are concerned, Dallas has given me moderate success. But one playbook that has worked very well for me is the Buffalo Bills. If I can find it here, there it is. Buffalo Bills 4-3 scheme. You're going to get sacks with this defense. I've had defenses finish in the top 5 with this playbook. I've had the number 1 defense in some situations. These are two very good playbooks. So playbooks, I cannot stress enough how crucial they are. And those are my personal recommendations. And as always looking for recommendations on new playbooks to try. If you give me one and I try it out, I will shout you out in the next video. I guarantee it. Now, tip number 3 is going to be your coach points. These are very important. If you're not utilizing these, if you're not spending them, not paying attention to them, you are missing out, and this could be another reason why your team's not winning as many games as they could be. So to get these upgraded, you're going to go manage staff, franchise staff, and you'll notice here, look at the top right-hand corner where we have that number 2. Those are how many points we have. You earn points throughout the season by meeting goals, which we will go over once we get to next season, and I will show you guys what that looks like. But here's what this will look like. So when you go to staff management, you've got points for your head coach, your offensive coordinator, your defensive coordinator, and your player personnel. So you'll notice we have a hole here at offensive coordinator. There's really not a whole lot to this. If you have a hole, just go ahead and hire a guy. It's not a big deal. But let's just run through these briefly here. What I would recommend doing is start with your staff modifications, because this is going to give you a discount on your offensive and defensive coordinator, which is where most of your points are going to go. So you'll notice here Frank Reich already has a discount on offensive talent. So for your offensive coordinator, anything that you purchase is going to be at a 20% discount. You'll want to do that for your defensive coordinator too before you purchase anything. So it's really up to you as far as what order you purchase these in, but what I would say is before you do anything for offensive or defensive coordinator, make sure that you're purchasing those points. One thing that I would also look to purchase sooner than later, especially in a rebuild when you've got a lot of young guys, is this player growth site. You'll notice here we already have purchased. The offensive line is going to get an increased boost in training by 20%. Running backs get a 10% boost, and we can purchase an additional one to get them up to 20%. Now we can purchase this one here to get that same boost for wide receivers and tight ends. And you can get another one for quarterbacks. Down all the way at the bottom, you can do one where all of your players count as scheme fits during training. That will get them additional training. Fountain of Youth, if you have old guys on your team, I would recommend doing this in the preseason every single year. So for the Colts, for example, if I've got enough points, I would maybe purchase this and use this on the cornerback position to prevent Stephon Gilmore from regressing for another season. Now over here, there's not really a whole lot that you would immediately want to worry about. Some of these that are further down are luxuries. For example, after school tutoring, you can access an additional focus player through weekly strategy. I would purchase that once you've built up your other areas, but it is a good one. Okay, and now that we've covered the head coach, let's look at the offensive and defensive coordinator. So as far as when you purchase these, I would say it's completely up to you. What you could do is for the first year or so of your rebuild, you could focus on the other areas. You could build up your head coach areas. You could build up your player personnel. Because when you start purchasing these offensive and defensive talents, you're going to notice your teams are going to start winning more games. Especially once you get all the way down offensively on this first tree, you are going to be able to get a strength boost for your offensive lineman by 4. That is a huge difference. You think about it, you've got 5 players in your offensive line, their strength is increased by 4. That gives you a massive competitive edge. Over here on the right side, once you get all the way down, you can boost your catching for your wide receivers and tight ends by 5. What I would recommend doing is on these trees, go to the outer edges. I like the boost on each side a little bit more because look, if I purchase this one on the left hand side, it's going to lock up this right hand side so I can't purchase these. But for me personally, I like the outer ones better. That's up to you though. Look them over, review them, see which ones you think would be more beneficial for you. Defensively, I would do the same thing. So unfortunately, the CPU has already kind of purchased a few of them for us, but look, I can use this one right here now that we're all the way at the bottom. This will boost the strength for our whole defensive line by 4 points. Again, that's a massive edge. So I would say, once you start doing your rebuild, you'll earn points every single week. You can spend these as you go along. That's kind of what I do. Usually though, I will save my points, use them in other areas when I know that I'm probably going to be losing games. That way, I get a higher draft pick, and then I start using these once I really want to start competing. Now, the player personnel, I would recommend spending these before you do any trading or before you're signing any players to contracts, because it's going to give you a discount and a bonus on certain things. So for trading, let's say you want to trade for a veteran player, 5% trade discount on players older than 30. You can get that. You can get discounts on draft picks. You can get boosts to the value of your draft picks. So if you're going to be trading up or trading down in the draft, make sure you're purchasing these first. Any trades that you're going to do, look through these prices. When you go all the way down, you can get discounts on CPU players and value increases on your players. So if you're going to trade a guy away, try and purchase some of these points first. If you're going to trade up in the draft, try and get this one down here, Smooth Talker, reduce the cost of trading up during the draft. Now, contracts, before you go to re-sign anyone, in fact, I will actually go ahead and purchase a couple of these, because we are going to be about to re-sign a couple players. You can choose hometown discount, so where you can get up to a 5% discount, and if you purchase all 3 of these, it's a 5% discount on anyone under 90 overall. You have boosts for free agency. You have boosts through pretty much just free agency. What you can do though, all the way at the bottom, is if a player is not interested, this one, Unlocker, is a big one. Unlock one player and re-signing who is not interested in negotiating once per season. So that's a good one as well. So just again, as a brief recap of these, I would start out with getting some of your head coach talents. The XP ones are big. The offensive and defensive coordinator discounts are big. Player personnel, it's going to depend on what you're doing. If you make a lot of trades, purchase some trade talents. If you want help with your contract negotiations, purchase some contract ones. Let's say, for example, Nick Bosa hits free agency. Maybe before you negotiate with Nick Bosa, if he's not interested in you, purchase a couple of these applying pressures. That way you are getting a little bit of an edge, and maybe you can bring someone like him in. And then these offensive and defensive coordinator talents, I would say purchase, as you go along and as needed, but definitely keep prioritizing them. Make sure at some point you get these all filled out. Now, my next tip is a bit of a smaller one, but still one that is helpful. Attend your press conferences. Anytime you get something like this, Pro Bowl Media Day, anything, you get a lot of them before week 1. If you make the playoffs, you'll get them. Sometimes you'll get them peppered throughout the season. So go to them, because a lot of times you'll earn points, you'll earn XP out of them. So this is the Pro Bowl Media Day. The Pro Bowl is an example of one where if you're not in the Super Bowl, you'll get this every single year. So let's take a look here. Reporter asks, I'm sure you'd rather be at the Super Bowl, still has to be nice to wind down and have some fun. What do you get from coaching the Pro Bowl? I don't think it really matters either way. You can choose cut loose or choose coach elite talent. Let's just go ahead and pick cut loose. It's not the Super Bowl, you don't get many opportunities, that's the fun part, and you get 5 staff points out of it. So again, it's not going to change the game for you in a massive way, but it's still worth having. And now, once you've gotten to the off-season, my next tip of advice would be to sign wisely. And sign wisely is going to look different for everyone. So, few factors that I take into account when re-signing players, they're the exact same factors that real-life NFL teams take into account. What's the player's interest in your team? Are you going to have to overpay for them? What's your salary cap situation looking like? How old is the player? What do you have behind them? So let's look at our first example here, Bobby Okereke. He's 27 years old. He's going to want a 4-year deal, 81 overall. So that's another thing. How talented are they? Obvious question, right? So what do we have behind him? JoJo Dodman and Zaire Franklin? Not really a whole lot. He's got no interest in us, so we can change the type of deal that we offer him. We could try a player friendly. It's a 5-year deal. If you look at the cap hit, that's not a massive hit. He gets up to around $8 million, and for a starting middle linebacker, it's personal preference, guys. Me personally, I would probably pay that because I'm not the best drafter of middle linebackers, so let's see if he would take it, and he does. So that is a situation where it works out for you. Next up, we've got Yannick Ngakoue. Same thing here. How old is he? He's 27. He's not the oldest in the world. Do we really have anything behind him? Not really. What's his level of interest in the team? It's lukewarm. I would probably give him a neutral deal here, and if he doesn't take it, then, that would push defensive end up pretty high on my draft board. It would already be pretty high because he's not the world's greatest player, but we at least get him around. He's a Band-Aid. He'll stick with us for a year. Next up, we've got Paris Campbell, 26 years old. We don't really have great depth in the receiver room. His deal would cost us around $6 million. $7-8 million for a 77 overall receiver. Again, guys, personal preference. I don't think I would pay that because even a player friendly, I don't know that he would take. Now you've got your kicker. If your kicker's not interested, and you just go out and get one in free agency. Usually Harrison Butker's sitting there in the preseason. Don't worry about the kicker. Rodney McLeod is here. For me, he's 33 years old. And then once you start getting down to the low 70s, usually these are just guys that you can replace as undrafted free agents. I wouldn't really waste or spend your time on them, to be completely honest with ya. And now we are officially in the offseason to where we can start signing free agents. It will give you that option. It's going to give you a big list here of who's available. So how do you know who to go after and who to try and sign? Well, let's work in reverse here. I'm going to show you guys kind of how I make my decisions with this next tip here and this next piece of advice on how to handle free agency. So when I say work in reverse, I don't know that that's the best way to put it, but what I mean by that is look at your team and assess what your needs are. So for us, the Indianapolis Colts, quarterback's an obvious one for us. That is something to where you have to consider what you're going to address in the draft as well. But do we really want to enter the season with potentially Matt Ryan as the starter again if quarterback doesn't go our way in the draft? I wouldn't think so. Maybe we do look to bring in a veteran. It's iffy. We've got 2 veterans on the roster right now, so that is something worth considering. The other thing is going to be the offensive line. So Bernhard Raimann, you have to consider each player's situation. So he's a young player, second-year guy, played pretty well as a rookie. He's a 74 overall. I think we're fine there. However, Danny Pinter, a 65 overall right guard, I would say is probably not going to cut it. Basically, if you've got a guy in the 60s, go ahead and sign someone in free agency or draft them. You should not have anyone in the 60s in your starting roster. And guys in the 70s, you're going to want to look at their situation. So for example, Ryman, second-year guy. Alec Pierce is a 74, but he's a second-year guy. Now Ryan Kelly's a 78 overall, but the guy's about 30, so he's someone we might want to look into replacing. Jelani Woods is a 70 overall. I'd probably like him to start over 73 overall Mo Alley Cox. So this is another lesson within a lesson, is get your youth out there. Now let's look at the defensive side of the ball. Definitely need another linebacker here. Grant Stewart's not going to cut it. Strong safety, Nick Cross, second-year player. Probably not going to look to bring in anyone to replace him. Zaire Franklin, also 70 overall. I want to say he's like 24, 25 years old off the top of my head. Yannick Ngakoue, we signed him for the next 2 years. He's a 78, so he's serviceable. So heading into free agency, just based on the little sneak peek that I got, it doesn't look like a great class. The class is going to also dictate where you spend your money. So let's look back at it, and I'll kind of, lay out what positions you would want to most prioritize in free agency. So as quickly as possible here, I will run through each and every position and kind of lay out my philosophy for whether or not I spend on them in free agency. Quarterback's the first one. Usually I'm not going to be signing a guy in free agency. I've yet to do that. There have been rebuilds where I've seen guys like Justin Herbert or Jalen Hurts hit the market. That would be fun. So if that's something that you're interested in doing, by all means go for it. However, usually it's just not really going to be worth it. Even if we were to bring in a guy like Jimmy G, he's probably not going to be the starter for us. We could spend our money elsewhere. Running back is a position that usually you can get a guy in the draft if you don't already have one. We have Jonathan Taylor. I usually wouldn't recommend paying big money to a running back. Now, the one thing I would say is occasionally it's worth it to get yourself a backup, because especially in Sim, once you get to the playoffs, those guys do seem to start getting carries for some reason, especially if you do the play-by-play, which if you watch my videos, you know that we do. We have seen a couple games where for some reason the CPU will insert the backup running back, and if you don't have a good guy in there, then it can hurt you. So sometimes it is worth it to see who's out here. If you can get, like a 28, 29-year-old guy on a cheap deal, not a bad idea. Fullback, I usually don't have a fullback in my offense. Receiver is a good one that I would say, because when you draft receivers, it does take them a little bit to get developed up. We've seen guys like Marvin Harrison Jr. develop into the 90s, but it takes a little bit. So usually what I would say to do is in year 2, you start to see some really good guys out here. Justin Jefferson, Brandon Ayuk, Gabe Davis are guys that have all made big differences for us. So receiver is one. If you can get yourself a number 1 guy out here, especially one that's 25, 26 years old, I would say do it. I'm not seeing any in this class, so I would ignore that. Tight end is definitely a position worth spending on that I feel. It's just usually you don't really see any great guys out here. Evan Ingram would be entertaining for us, but we've got Jelani Woods. He's got no interest, so based on my situation, I probably wouldn't. Offensive line. I would say depending on how much you've invested into your offensive line, it's worth paying a guy out here. We're paying big money to Quentin Nelson, Ryan Kelly, and Braden Smith, so I probably would not. I would probably look to draft any other holes that we have on the line, specifically that guard position, unless we could get someone in for cheap. And depending on what kind of offers a player has, that's another tip. If no one's offering a player, even if they have no interest in you, go for it. So Isaac Siamalu, hopefully I pronounced that correctly, we're going to send him a 2-year deal. We're the only one on his list right now, so hopefully we could get him in here. Now Nate Davis, he is 3 years younger, but he's got 9 offers, so I doubt we can get in on him. Moving on to the defensive line, this is a position absolutely worth spending on, and what I would say to prioritize is the end position. If you can get yourself a young stud out there, like let's just say Brian Burns, Nick Bosa, I'm trying to think if anyone else hits the market. Those are the 2 main ones that I see. But any defensive ends, Chase Young would be another one. A guy who's 25, 26 years old. Bryce Huff isn't quite good enough. DT is a position you can actually usually draft pretty well. And we'll go into our drafting tips in just a moment. So usually I wouldn't spend on a DT, but defensive end is a big one. So for me, so far I would say get yourself a number 1 receiver and get yourself a defensive end in free agency. If you can do those 2 things, usually you're going to see success. The linebacker position, depending on who's out there, depending on who fits your scheme, it's occasionally worth spending on. So far I'm not really seeing anyone. The outside positions are usually pretty weak, so one thing that you can do is sign a middle linebacker and move them to one of your outside positions. We've had success with that in the past. That is a suggestion as well. Cornerback, I would say, is one that we have spent on. I don't know that it makes a massive difference. Usually when you draft guys, they play okay for you. It doesn't make a massive difference, but still it's nice having a number 1 corner out there. I don't have any evidence to back this up, but I definitely feel that your front 7 is a lot more important to your defense than your secondary. And moving on to the free safety position, this is one that there are certain positions I feel are harder to draft than others. I think free safety and strong safety are a little bit tougher. You don't see them make as many gains XP-wise as you would like a running back or a quarterback. So if you can get yourself a good safety out in free agency, I would say go ahead and do it. And then kicker and punter, you can do that. But rest assured, if you don't sign a guy during this stage, they will still be out there in the preseason. You don't really have to worry about that a whole lot. So now if we go over here to our targeted, go back to our top 100 and click evaluate offer with the left stick. He is gone, and there he is. So we got ourselves a new starting right guard. You don't have to break the bank in free agency. Usually year 1, you're not going to. Year 2, though, if the guys are out there and you've got the money, go for it. Because you never know how good a class is going to be or how bad a class is going to be. In my experience, and I think each and every one of my videos would back this up, year 1 is weak. Usually it's like Odell Beckham, Kareem Hunt. Year 2 is stacked for some reason. We probably won't get to year 2 in this video because it would be redundant at that point, but usually year 2 is stacked, and then any remaining years are a bit of a mixed bag. Sometimes they're good, sometimes they're great, sometimes they're terrible. But I would say spend in year 2 if you can. And next up, I'm briefly going to cover drafting here. We're not going to do a very big deep dive into drafting and scouting because I feel that could warrant a whole video of its own. I don't want this thing to drag on too long. So if you would like an in-depth guide on scouting and drafting, please let me know and I will put one together. But let me just run through the very, very basics here quickly. So a lot of questions that I get are how do you get the custom draft classes in there? On this main menu here, you can select choose draft class. It will give you an option where you can keep the auto-generated rookies, download from Madden Share, or import local file. If you select download from Madden Share, here's what it'll look like. So you get this big list here, all these draft classes that people have created. Usually the draft classes, the custom ones, are going to be at the top. Those are the most popular. So we'll just select 2023 NFL Draft. I've already downloaded it, so I'll just select overwrite my file, and then it will download for us. And then once the draft class is downloaded, it will look like this. And you can see here all of the real life prospects: Bryce Young, Will Anderson, Jalen Carter, CJ Stroud. Now, as far as drafting and scouting is concerned, there's a lot of scouting that you can do to get guys 100% completed, so you can get a really good idea of what they look like as a player. So here's Bryce Young. He's 100% scouted. It's going to show us his talents in just about every single category. We're going to get a really good idea of the type of player that he is, the level of talent that he has, and physicals are going to update for you as well. Once you get into the draft, right before the draft, you'll have a full idea of the NFL Combine, the College Pro Day. And now people do wonder how we consistently get hidden dev players, and what I would recommend to do is do this. For a position that you're looking at, go through every single player. So let's just say I'm looking for a DT. I'll start with Jalen Carter. Look for your athletes. Go to their physicals. This is a bad example because for these guys, it's not going to show them, but if you've watched any of my rebuilds, if you start looking at the later round guys, just look for guys that have really high numbers on the bench. Or for a receiver, look for someone who ran the fastest 40 or had the best 3-cone drill. Same thing with cornerbacks. Same thing with linebackers. Quarterbacks, I don't think it matters as much what level of athlete they are. You're more so going to want to look at their talent, so you're going to want to look for A's across the board. So you can see here, CJ Stroud is an A in everything. Bryce Young is A's and B's. So that's what you want to see with your player. So I know it's very, very basic advice. I know it doesn't help a whole ton, but really the two main things are look for the talents and look for the athletes. And again, if you guys want a more in-depth breakdown, which I'm more than happy to provide, if there's a market for that, let me know and I will gladly put one together. Now, while we're still in the off season, my next piece of advice that I think is a big one that helps me a lot as far as being able to retain the talent that I want to keep, being able to remain competitive year after year, is be like Belichick. And when I say be like Belichick, cut a player too early before you cut them too soon. Don't cut them, but see what you can get for them as far as trade value goes. And what I would say to do when you're doing that is every single free agency, the first thing that you'll want to do is go to manage roster, team salaries, and look and see who has 1 year left on their deal and really think, who are you actually going to be keeping around long term? So this tab here, remaining length. These are the players that you're going to have to negotiate with, who you will lose if you don't re-sign them at this time next year. Jonathan Taylor, Stephon Gilmore, Kenny Moore, who else we got here? Grover Stewart, Michael Pittman. A lot of great names here. So let's see what we can do. Here's an example. This is actually someone that the Colts have been rumored to be interested in trading. And we need a quarterback. So let's see here if we can go ahead and trade away Michael Pittman. This is another thing. Decide how realistic you want to be. And by realistic, that is subjective. So that means something different to everyone. But something that has been rumored is that the Colts could trade up with the Bears. Number 4 overall, Michael Pittman, and maybe even a little bit more. But since we're doing the rebuild here, let's just see if this would be enough to do it. I think that it might, and it is. So that is a situation to where, would we want to pay Michael Pittman long term? I don't know. That's a good question. It's something to where it's going to be your personal preference. Now, Stephon Gilmore. Here is a player that is 32 years old. We know we're probably not going to be very good next year. So let's see if we could get a late first round pick for him from a team that could use a corner. So let's just go through our list here and see. Let's start with the draft picks. We want someone that has a late first round pick. So the Bengals. The Bengals could be a good destination for Stephon Gilmore. What have they got at that position? Not a whole lot of anything. They could definitely use someone of his caliber. Let's see if we could get the 29th overall pick for him. And they'll take it. So these are 2 players now that we're going to be saving money on. Of course, it's a trade-off. It creates 2 new holes for us, cornerback and receiver. when this team already had some decent holes to fill, but now we've gotten ourselves some draft capital. We're going to be filling a hole that we have at quarterback, and I'm not saying trade away everyone, but just a couple guys there. It's going to be completely up to you. Who fits your long-term vision? Who can you see yourself keeping around? Those are questions to ask, but I would definitely recommend every offseason go in here and see if there are guys that you can get value for while you still can. And now once you're in the draft, go ahead and pause it. That will give yourself plenty of time to make your selection. Let's just go ahead and see here what it looks like when you actually take a player. What kind of feedback it gives you. So the Colts, they've been leaning to trading up to number 1 overall. We could really go either direction here. CJ Stroud or Bryce Young. I like Stroud. Please don't destroy me in the comments for this. I am an Ohio State fan, so I'm going to go Stroud here. Do I think Bryce Young can be a better NFL player? Absolutely. I don't know. It could go either way. Both of these guys are very talented, but we're going to select CJ Stroud there, and you can see I did skip through it a little bit quickly, but he did have that hidden dev. And then let's go to my next piece of advice here. Number 29, that is going to be don't force it. So really, we know we have this need at receiver. We know that we're picking it again fairly shortly after this. Let's take a look here and see who is available at the receiver position, because we know we just traded away Pittman. Let's see who we've got here. Just take a quick look. Okay, so a couple guys here that I would be interested in. Josh Downs is someone that I've got a lot of interest in. He's the 3rd receiver on the board. We're picking again fairly shortly after this. So it's going to be a decision that you need to make is, are you going to want to take your guy there? Do you want to maybe try and trade back? Here's what it looks like if you trade back though. Always keep in mind that you have that option to trade back, and you can get yourself first round picks in future drafts, which have the potential to be a lot higher than the one that you're trading away. So this is something that I've had in the past success with. Let's say I trade with the Titans, and the Titans are terrible. I'm giving them the 29th pick overall right now, but I could very well be getting a top 5 pick next year. We've seen this play out in real life, where now the Lions are picking very high because of their trade with the Rams, because the Rams were so bad. The Seahawks have a top 5 draft pick because the Broncos were terrible. So these picks that right now don't look like they have a ton of value, they very well could in the future. So what I will do is I'll go ahead and take this selection from the Titans, and this could end up being a very good pick next year. At the very worst, they'll be picking 32nd, and I mean, it's the Titans. They're not going to be picking 32nd. I can tell you that right now. And now we can look here and see, because we know that we have another selection here, if our guys are still on the board. If not, that's a bummer. But if they are, you know, fantastic. So let's see here. Josh Downs, that's someone I had a lot of interest in. We'll go ahead and look at him here. See if we can view his numbers. So there you do have his college pro day. So again, what are we looking for here? Speed, 3-cone drill, 20-yard shuttle. Those are usually good indicators of someone's speed, acceleration, agility. He looks good. If you're top 10 in the class, usually that's good. If you're top 5 in any categories, that's a really good indicator. And there, he does come with that hidden dev. And speed kills in Madden, guys. Get yourself someone with speed, 95 speed, 95 excel. Josh Downs looks incredible. And of course, plenty of selections left to make, but I think that about covers it for the draft tips. So again, just to reiterate everything that we've gone through, look for the athletes, look for the guys that are graded in the A to Bs, do some deep diving there, find yourself some late round gems. With the CPU generated classes, they're always in there, I guarantee it. You're gonna find someone in the 4th, 5th round who is just a really, really good player. And don't be afraid to trade back and get yourself some value in future drafts. Now my next tip here is preseason free agency. Right after the draft ends, go out and look and see which guys didn't get signed. Because usually you're going to have some guys out there who are pretty solid that just did not garner a lot of interest from teams. So Matt Gay, he's an 80 overall. He's replacing the 73 overall kicker that we got last year, and we didn't have to overpay him. We get him on a 1-year deal. Who else is out here? Brandon Graham could be interesting. He's a scheme fit. We don't really have any young guys at that position. It's going to be him and Yannick Ngakoue, so it's not like we're going to be stunting Yannick Ngakoue's growth. We might as well bring him in while he's sitting there. And then you can also look and see undrafted free agents. Sort it by age. See if there are any guys out there who are really good. I'm not seeing any here, unfortunately. Nobody that's a rookie, but still it's worth looking just to see what's out there. And once you have actual games to play, preseason or not, every single week you want to do your weekly strategy. And let me walk you through how you want to do that. So you can click A here and decide what you like to defend. Usually, in my experience, going deep pass is going to give you the best results. And defensively, it's going to be blitz counter. I think regardless of the team that you're going against, if you do those two things, usually it's going to work out pretty well for you. Now here is how you get your coach points. You can set your weekly game plan goals, and you want to adjust these every single week, because if you don't, the CPU is going to set pretty unrealistic ones for you. We got lucky with this one interception, that's not bad. 24 points or less, that's not bad. 200 plus offensive yards, that's doable. Now here's one, win by 17 plus points. How often are the Colts going to win by 17 plus? Probably not very. So what you could do is 15 plus first downs, that's pretty conservative. And if you even hit half of that, you're still going to get 2 points. So I would say be conservative with these within reason, but you're definitely not going to want to do the outlandish ones. You know, like 5 plus rushing touchdowns. That's not going to happen very often. Allow 10 points or less. That's not going to happen often at all. 400 plus offensive yards. Yes, the reward is great if you can hit it. It's just you're probably not going to hit it a whole lot. And then you go ahead and hit start training. And now this is what's going to earn you boost for the game. So your team's going to perform better each and every week. That's why you want to make sure that you're doing this. You're going to get yourself more wins. And you're also going to get experience for your players that you can use to upgrade them. And it didn't give us any this week, but if we go to next week, we might have some. We'll look here in just a second. See if we've got anyone ready to upgrade. We don't. So let's do the weekly strategy one more time here. And one more thing to note is keep an idea of which players you want to focus on. It doesn't have to be the 3 rookies that you just drafted. Let's say, for example, I don't want to worry about Trevius Hodges. I could try and get some more points into, let's just say, Alec Pierce. I could go to receiver here. I could select Alec Pierce if he's someone that I really want to focus on developing, and I could go ahead and hit start training there. So that would help Alec Pierce out. That's something, again, those staff points, if you use those on your coach side, you're going to unlock up to 6 players you can use that on. That's very valuable. Highly recommend doing that as soon as you can. And now you can see we are able to upgrade our players. This is something where you can do it automatically if you'd like to. You can hit Y. It'll say, are you sure you want to auto upgrade all players? Or you can go in and do it manually. So for Dayo Odengbo, if the CPU does it, it will most likely automatically go to his run stopper category, since that's where he's the best scheme fit for us. But he's best as a speed rusher, so I'm going to keep putting points into that. Hopefully he can develop into a good pass rusher for us. That's personal preference, completely up to you guys. And so every single week, you'll just want to go through this exact same cycle. Play your games, do your training, go to your press conferences if you have them, and upgrade your players as you go along. Here's a good example here, training camp standout. This one is huge. Do this every single time you see it, because your player will get an instant boost. Let's see who it is. Usually it's like a 2nd or 3rd year guy. Could be Kwity Paye, would be my guess. Yep, it's Kwity Paye. So let's see here. You are going to get a boost for either option for Kwity Paye, rushing the passer or stopping the run. We want sacks, we're going to go rushing the passer. And if we see here, look, right away he got +3 power and finesse moves. That's incredible. That's a massive boost for Kwity Paye. But anyways, just keep doing that. Every single week, that's what I would recommend doing, especially if you're not playing the games. If you're playing the games, hop in there, have fun, whatever, but still make sure you're doing all those other options. Once you get to the mid-season point is where usually I cut things off. That's usually where we check in. So let's look and see a couple things you can do there. So the mid-season point is a big one because it is the trade deadline. After this point, you're not going to be able to make any more trades, and depending on your situation, you either might be wanting to bring guys in or you might be wanting to ship guys out. So in our situation, we're 2-5, we're probably not going to make the playoffs. Let's look here and see who's ready to negotiate and see if we can possibly get any value. So we're going to have $84 million in cap space. We're not really going to worry about Matt Gay or Brandon Graham right now. We know we've got a couple better guys that we need to worry about. So Jonathan Taylor, 90 overall, 24 years old. My personal preference, I'd bring him back. Now, Kenny Moore, here's an interesting one. 28 years old, no interest whatsoever, 86. He's going to start regressing. Grover Stewart, also no interest. So this is a situation where maybe we look to trade a guy away. I'm not saying every single one, but think about it from a real-life team's perspective. Look at the Panthers this last season. They were underachieving. They wanted to start a rebuild, or they were kind of in the process of a rebuild. Panthers are a bit of a tricky team, but I digress. So the Panthers, they trade away Christian McCaffrey. It actually ended up working decently well for them, but they trade him to a contender. So let's see here, Kenny Moore or Grover Stewart. Which one do we think is going to get us a little bit more value? Here's what I'm going to do. I am going to try to trade away Kenny Moore because I know that we just drafted a guy, cornerback. Cornerback's usually a pretty easy position to replace. So let's see what we can get for Kenny Moore. And remember, we want to spend some of those points since we haven't already done so. We're going to go to manage staff, franchise staff, and let's go ahead and spend some points here. So I'm going to go over to my player personnel. I'm going to go down the list. So I'm going to do the first one because you can't go any further without that. I'm going to purchase one of these draft pick strategies. I'm actually going to do this one, a discount on CPU draft picks, because that's most likely what we're going to be trading Kenny Moore for, is a draft pick. I'm going to go down here and see. No, I won't quite be able to make it on a value increase for my user players, but I will be able to get a discount on draft picks. So Kenny Moore, with his rating, I might be able to get a late first for him. And since I want to trade Kenny Moore, I'm simply going to go here to my trade center. I will go ahead and go to manual trade, select my guy Kenny Moore. He's actually pretty high up on the list, one of the best players on the team. And I want to look and see which team is contending. So if I go to draft picks, which one is projected late first right now? Bears are projected 12th. They're pretty bad, it looks like. I want someone in the 20s or 30s because a bad team is just not going to trade a first round pick for Kenny Moore. It doesn't make any sense whatsoever. What about the Cardinals? They're projected 28th, so they're looking like a playoff team right now. I don't think they necessarily need him. I'm going to keep looking here. What about the Chargers? Could the Chargers use a corner? I know they've got J.C. Jackson. They've got Asante Samuel Jr. Probably not. Let's keep going here. Chiefs are usually okay on corner. You can also look and see the team needs. I'm going to look for one that has corner highly listed. So Cowboys are projected 19th. So they'd be a playoff team. I would say they could definitely use help at that position. So let's see if the Cowboys would give us a first round pick for Kenny Moore. And they do. So easy as that. And again, it might not be the most realistic strategy in the entire world, but it's close enough, guys. It's a video game. Have fun with it. Get yourself some draft picks. Let's get to the playoffs here and see what kind of assets we have moving into the offseason. So here we are at the end of the season. We went 6-11, pretty terrible year overall. But look at this, the Titans. Remember, we got that first round pick from them in the draft by trading back. They went 6-11 as well. Here's how you can check and see what your draft picks are going to be looking like. You can go manage roster, NFL roster. And what you can do is just hit your right stick here, go up to draft picks, and here are the picks that we're working with. So right now, we're going to be picking second from the Titans. That's incredible. Look and see what trading back can do for you guys. We had the 29th overall pick. We turned it into the second overall pick. We're going to be picking 7th, courtesy of our own terrible season. And right now, we don't know the Cowboys pick. Projected to be 25th. Could be better, could be worse. We don't know yet. But regardless, that is just a testament to see how trading back can do. What I would recommend doing at the end of every season is check your stats, see how you did. This is going to give you a good idea of what your needs are heading into next year. So offense was 17th in the league. That's right around average. Defense was 23rd. So defense we know is probably going to be a focus for us. Offense we know, maybe some growing pains, but look and see what those playbooks do. CJ Stroud, 4,700 yards, 34 touchdowns, 18 picks. I told you guys that's right around what I projected. Picks are a little bit high, but I think if we get him some help in year 2, he'll be looking a lot better. Johnathon Taylor, 1,100 yards, 12 scores, same deal. It's not so much the playbook as it is the talent. In the receiving game, Kiki Qt's the leading receiver, okay? Alec Pierce, 1,000 yards. Josh Downs, 926 and 8. So usually your drafted guys, your young guys are going to do just fine in that playbook. Blocking is an area to definitely look at. You want to see how many sacks your team's allowing. So Bernard Ryman let up 17. Usually you want to see around 10 or so. I know he's a young guy. But with that in mind, that's something to where, based on your opinion, based on your thoughts, maybe look into replacing that. Defensively, tackles are not the most important in the world. That's not going to give you a great picture. You want to look at the sacks, see how your pass rush is doing. So the only guys getting double digits for us are our DTs. Our defensive ends have disappointed, so we definitely want to address that in the draft. Interceptions, I mean, it's something to look at. It doesn't give you a great idea as far as your team's performance, but definitely we can tell we're going to need some help on that side of the ball. And here we are in the offseason. It's come full circle once again. So at this point, we've seen every single step of the process. We've made it a full year through the rebuild. You guys should have all the tools now that you need to know who to re-sign, how you're going to re-sign them, how you're going to structure your deals, which guys you might look into trading and how to check for that, what kind of players you want to draft, what kind of players you want to sign in free agency, how to spend your staff points, how to do the weekly training and get your players leveled up. These are just a few general tips. I know we didn't go into anything on a super deep level, but I hope this has helped you guys. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. I appreciate you, and I will see you in the next video.